The barber who extracted D-Day's plan using only a mirror and a razor, it sounds like the stuff of legend, a wartime fable, but what if it was true? What if, in the tense spring of 1944, with the fate of the free world hanging in the balance, the secret to the largest amphibious invasion in human history was not found in a codebook or a spy report, but in a barber's chair? This is not a story of frontline combat, of tanks clashing on the steppe, or dogfights over the channel. This is a story of a different kind of war, a war of nerves, a war of whispers, a psychological battle fought not with bullets, but with perception, with shame, and with the most mundane of instruments, a pair of scissors, a straight razor, and a simple mirror. Our setting is not a battlefield, but a specially designed interrogation center, known as Camp King near Oberursel, Germany, in the chaotic aftermath of its capture by American forces. The date, late April, 1944. The clock is ticking. Over 1 million men are preparing for Operation Overlord, and German intelligence is desperately searching for the where and the when. And in this high-stakes shadow war, an unassuming man, a soldier who had once measured success by a clean haircut and a satisfied customer, was about to undertake the most important shave of his life. Sergeant Jack Harrington of the U.S. Army's 12th Army Group was, by all standard military metrics, an unlikely candidate for a role in strategic intelligence. Before the war, he ran a successful barbershop in Scranton, Pennsylvania. He was drafted not for his knowledge of tactics, but for his steady hands and his ability to talk to anyone. He was assigned to the mundane but vital task of keeping the men groomed. However, in the U.S. military's rapidly evolving intelligence apparatus, certain officers began to recognize a different kind of weapon. They saw that barbers, by trade, were confidants. They were masters of casual conversation, skilled in putting people at ease, and trained to observe the smallest details, a twitch, a change in expression, the set of a jaw. Harrington was transferred to the newly established interrogation team at Camp King, a facility that had been a Luftwaffe interrogation center and was now being used against its former masters. His target was not a typical prisoner. He was Oberleutnant Klaus Vogel, a captured Luftwaffe intelligence officer. Vogel was no frontline pilot. He was an analyst, a desk man who had been attached to the German High Command's Western Intelligence Branch. Initial interrogations by seasoned officers had hit a brick wall. Vogel was polite, correct, and utterly resistant to traditional pressure. He gave nothing but his name, rank, and serial number. He was, in the parlance of the time, a hard case, but intelligence suggested he knew something. His position gave him access to broader assessments, to the German Fremd here west, the intelligence arm studying the Allied forces in Britain. The Allies had to know. How much did Germany know? Had their intricate web of deception, Operation Fortitude, which created phantom armies under General Patton, been successful? Did the Germans believe the invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais? The answers were locked inside Vogel's mind. With D-Day planning entering its final, irrevocable phase, time was a commodity more precious than oil or ammunition. The commanding officer of the interrogation unit, Major Richard Ellison, made an unconventional decision. He pulled Sergeant Harrington aside. "Forget he's an officer," Ellison said. "Forget he's the enemy. Just give him a haircut and talk to him." Harrington prepared his tools with a care he hadn't needed since his shop back home. He selected his sharpest straight razor, his finest badger hair brush, a fresh cake of shaving soap, and a clean, crisp apron. But his most critical tool was the mirror, a large, handheld glass in a simple frame. The interrogation room was modified. The harsh overhead light was replaced with a softer lamp. The cold metal chair was swapped for a more comfortable one. The table with the bright light was pushed to the side. In its center was Harrington's barber chair, salvaged from a local town. The atmosphere was designed to disorient, to create a profound sense of cognitive dissonance. Vogel was brought in, expecting another session of tense questioning. Instead, he found Harrington, smiling easily, apron on, gesturing to the chair. "The Major thought you could use a trim, Lieutenant." Standard procedure. Vogel was suspicious, but the sheer normalcy of the offer was disarming. For weeks, his world had been one of deprivation, questioning, and sterile military confrontation. This was different. This was civilized. Reluctantly, he sat. Harrington draped the cloth over him, chatting amiably about nothing in particular: the weather, the poor quality of the soap compared to what he used back home, the skill needed to get a proper lather. He began with the scissors, carefully trimming Vogel's overgrown hair. He worked in silence for moments, then asked innocuous questions. Not about the war, but about Vogel's home. Did he have a family barber in Berlin? Did he prefer a particular style? Harrington's movements were smooth, professional, calming. He was recreating as precisely as possible the environment of trust and vulnerability that exists between any man and his barber. The German officer, starved for any shred of dignity and normalcy, began to relax. The defenses, so rigid under direct assault, began to lower. Harrington observed everything. The tension in the shoulders that eased slightly. The way Vogel's eyes closed for just a second too long when the hot towel was applied. This was the first phase, the establishment of a harmless, almost therapeutic connection. Then Harrington picked up the straight razor. He opened it with a crisp, metallic snick that echoed in the quiet room. He began to hone it slowly, deliberately on a leather strap. The sound was rhythmic, primal. He then lathered Vogel's face with the warm, fragrant soap. "Now you'll have to keep very still for this," Harrington said, his voice a low, steady murmur. "A bad razor is a dangerous thing, but a nervous hand is worse." The unspoken message was clear. "I hold an incredibly sharp blade to your throat. Your safety is in my hands and in your own ability to remain calm." The power dynamic had subtly, irrevocably shifted. Harrington was no longer just a serviceman. He was in absolute control. He began to shave Vogel, the razor scraping gently across the skin. He worked with precision, starting at the cheeks. He made small talk, but now it shifted slightly. "You intelligence fellows, you must have a lot on your minds. Must be hard to know what's real and what's not with all this invasion talk." It was a statement, not a question, dropped casually between strokes. By the third session, a routine was established. Vogel would come in, sit, and almost seem to look forward to the respite. Harrington, meanwhile, was building a detailed psychological profile, fed back to Major Ellison after every cut. He learned that Vogel was proud, fastidious, a man of order who was deeply shamed by his capture and the disheveled state it had forced upon him. The haircut and shave were not a luxury to him. They were a restoration of his essential self. Harrington realized Vogel's vanity was his vulnerability. On the fourth visit, after the shave was complete, Harrington did something new. Instead of letting Vogel see his finished face immediately, he held up the mirror. But he held it at an angle, showing Vogel only a partial, distorted view. "There we are." "A proper officer again?" Harrington said cheerfully. Vogel tried to turn his head to see better, but Harrington held the mirror steady, offering only the flawed reflection. "It's a good job, if I do say so. Though it's a shame about that nick on the jawline. The skin was a bit tight there. There was no nick." Harrington's work was flawless. But by denying Vogel the clear, complete image of his restored self, and by suggesting an imperfection, Harrington planted a seed of profound anxiety. Vogel's hand rose instinctively to touch his face, his eyes troubled, seeking the truth in the deceptive glass. The psychological pressure was building, but the strategic clock was ticking faster. At Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, final briefings for Overlord were being held. The window for extracting actionable intelligence was slamming shut. If Vogel knew critical details about German defensive preparations, or, worse, if he possessed evidence that the Germans had pierced the fortitude deception, the entire invasion force could be sailing into a catastrophic trap. The weight of this knowledge pressed down on the entire Camp King team. Major Ellison confronted Harrington. "We're out of time, Sergeant. The next session is it? We need a breakthrough, or we write him off as a dead end." The invasion proceeds blind to what he knows. Harrington understood the stakes. The lives of thousands of men on the landing beaches might hinge on what happened in his makeshift barbershop. The morning of the decisive session, May 12, 1944, was overcast and gloomy. Harrington set his tools out with solemn care. When Vogel was brought in, the German officer immediately sensed a change in the air. The casual banter was gone. Harrington's demeanor was still professional, but it was focused, intense. He performed the haircut in near silence, the only sound the snipping of scissors. The ritual of the hot towel and lather was performed with ceremonial slowness. Harrington picked up the razor. He did not hone it, he simply held it, catching the light from the lamp. "They tell me the invasion is coming soon, Lieutenant Vogel," Harrington said, his voice no longer a friendly murmur, but quiet and clear. "They tell me you might know where?" "They tell me you might know that we're coming for Calais." He let the statement hang as he drew the razor down Vogel's cheek. This was the direct approach, but it was framed within the intimate, vulnerable context Harrington had built. He was no longer an interrogator asking questions. He was a confidant stating a fearful truth. Vogel remained silent, but his Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. Harrington continued, his eyes locked on his work, his voice conversational yet deadly serious. "A lot of young men are going to die, German boys, American boys, English boys. On the beaches, in the water. Because someone guessed wrong? Another stroke of the razor? My brother is on a transport ship right now. He's a cook. He's scared to death. This was a fiction, but it was delivered with raw conviction. I shave you, I make you look like a human being again, because that's what we are. Not monsters, just men. And men can choose." Then Harrington did the crucial thing. He finished the shave, wiped Vogel's face clean, and then, instead of offering the mirror, he placed it face down on the table beside them. He removed the apron and stood back, looking at Vogel with an expression of profound disappointment, almost pity. "We're done," Harrington said, his tone final, weary. "I won't be seeing you again? They're moving you to a permanent POW camp tomorrow. No more chairs, no more mirrors. Just wire and mud." He began to clean his razor, his back partly turned, a picture of a man who had given up. The silence in the room was absolute and crushing. For Vogel, the implications were terrifying. The return to anonymous, squalid captivity. The loss of this last bastion of personal care and dignity. The haunting image of the face he could not see, the nick that might be there, the final, flawed reflection of himself as he was cast back into the void. But more than that, it was the seismic shift in Harrington from friendly artisan to a man burdened by the impending slaughter. A man who had offered a thread of humanity and was now severing it. The psychological construct Harrington had built over weeks. The sanctuary of the chair was being dismantled before his eyes. Vogel was not just facing interrogation. He was facing the abyss of irrelevance and decay. Vogel sat in the chair, the clean smell of the aftershave tonic on his skin, staring at the back of the mirror on the table. The polished wood backing was all he could see. His own reflection, the confirmation of his restored self, was denied to him. Harrington's performance of weary resignation was a masterpiece of indirect pressure. The threat was not violence, but oblivion. "The 21st Panzer Division," Vogel said suddenly, his voice hoarse, breaking the silence. "It is not at Calais." Harrington did not turn around immediately. He slowly finished wiping his razor, his heart hammering against his ribs. He remained silent, letting the void pull more words from the German. "There are disagreements," Vogel continued, as if talking to himself, his eyes fixed on the hidden mirror. "Rommel believes the invasion will come at high tide, to shorten the exposure on the beach. Von Rundstedt disagrees. He favors a low-tide defense to expose the obstacles." He took a shaky breath. "The 15th Army is strong at Pas-de-Calais. The 7th Army in Normandy. It is considered a secondary line. A diversion. Your General Patton's army group is the threat. We have orders of battle, signals. They point to Calais. This was the gold." This was confirmation that Operation Fortitude was working. The Phantom Army was holding an entire German army in place, but Harrington needed more. He needed the subtle details that only an analyst would know. He turned, his face impassive. He walked over and picked up the mirror. He did not hand it to Vogel. He held it, reflecting his own face for a moment. "And what do you believe, Lieutenant Vogel?" he asked, his voice soft. "You've seen the reports. You've seen the reconnaissance. Where would you send 1,000,000 men?" Vogel looked from Harrington's eyes to the mirror, craving it. "The reports are contradictory," he admitted, the professional analyst in him overriding his caution, lured by the desire to engage, to prove his worth, to reconnect. "The air reconnaissance over Normandy is interdicted at great cost. Too great a cost for a diversion. The transport patterns in southern England. They are dense around Portsmouth, not just Dover. My own assessment, which was dismissed, was that the Schwerpunkt, the main thrust, could be in the Bailly de la Seine. Between Cherbourg and Le Havre, the terrain is less fortified. The beach gradients are not ideal for defense. If the weather is right, he was talking now, the words spilling out, a technical confession. He was giving them not just the German defensive belief, but the cracks in that belief, the doubts of their own intelligence apparatus, the locations where the wall was thin. Harrington listened, absorbing every word, every nuance. Then slowly he turned the mirror around. He held it up, allowing Klaus Vogel to see his own face for the first time that day. Clean-shaven, hair trimmed, the very image of a correct German officer. "Thank you, Lieutenant," Harrington said, with a tone of genuine respect. He handed Vogel the mirror. "You should hold on to that. Remember what a man looks like." The interrogation was over. Harrington gathered his tools and left the room. He walked directly to Major Ellison's office and reported verbatim everything Vogel had said. The information was immediately encoded and flashed through intelligence channels to London. It provided a critical, human-level validation of the Fortitude Deception's success. It confirmed that German intelligence was fractured and that their fixation on Calais was, indeed, paralyzing their response to the actual build-up in the south of England. It gave the Allied planners one more vital piece of the puzzle, not just where the Germans were strong, but where they were confused and weak in their convictions. The true value of Harrington's interrogation was not in uncovering a specific German defensive position or unit location, though the mention of the 21st Panzer S disposition was noted. Its value was psychological and strategic. It provided a high-confidence assessment from within the enemy's own system that their intelligence picture was fundamentally flawed. On June 6, 1944, when the first waves hit the beaches of Normandy, the German High Command, crucially, remained convinced for critical hours that this was a feint. The powerful 15th Army and its Panzer Reserve sat idle near Calais, awaiting the real invasion led by the fictional Patton, while Allied forces secured their foothold in France. Sergeant Jack Harrington was quietly commended for his service. There was no medal, no public ceremony for work done in the shadows. His report was filed among thousands of other intelligence fragments, a testament to the unsung cerebral warfare that made the physical invasion possible. Oberleutnant Klaus Vogel spent the rest of the war in a POW camp, his crucial contribution to the Allied war effort unknown even to himself. He was in the end a man who, in a moment of profound psychological dislocation, sought to reclaim his own image and in doing so, helped alter the image of the war. The legacy of this story lies in the acknowledgement that victory was forged, not only by soldiers on the front lines but by the unseen battles of wit and will. The mirror and the razor were symbols of a deeper truth, that the human need for dignity, for self-perception, and for connection can be a more powerful lever than any threat of force. Harrington's operation was a masterpiece of applied psychology, a soft technique that yielded hard, vital intelligence. It stands as a forgotten chapter in the vast history of D-Day, a reminder that sometimes, to unlock the greatest secrets, you don't need a battering ram. You need a barber's touch, a listening ear, and the reflective power of a simple mirror to show a man who he really is and what he stands to lose. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to World War II Records as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.